My name is Elena Torres and I'm 28 years old. For the past 6 years, I've been living what most people would call a quiet, responsible life. I work as a graphic designer from home, I pay my bills on time, I visit my mom every Sunday for dinner. On paper, everything looks perfectly normal. But there's something nobody knows about me, something I've been carrying in silence for so long that it's become like a second heartbeat, a secret that's about to explode in the worst possible way. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was in my kitchen making coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Elena Torres?" A woman's voice asked, professional but tense. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Detective Sarah Chen. I'm calling about your mother, Patricia Torres. We need you to come to the precinct immediately." My stomach dropped. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's fine physically," the detective said carefully. "But we've arrested her this morning. She's being charged with embezzlement and fraud. The amounts we're talking about are substantial, over $300,000. The coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, not because I was shocked that my mother had been arrested, but because I'd known this day would come eventually. You see, I've known about my mother's crimes for 3 years. I discovered them by accident, confronted her, and she made me promise to stay quiet. She cried, she begged, she swore she would fix everything. And like the fool I was, I believed her. Have you ever discovered something so terrible about someone you love that speaking up feels like betraying them, but staying silent feels like betraying yourself? That's where I've been living for 3 years, and now the choice has been ripped away from me. When I arrived at the police station, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely sign in at the front desk. Detective Chen met me in a small grey room that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. "Your mother worked as the financial controller at Riverside Community Foundation for 8 years, she began, sliding a folder across the table. "Over the past 5 years, she's been systematically stealing from donor funds, falsifying records, and creating phantom vendors to funnel money into personal accounts." I stared at the documents without really seeing them. Bank statements, wire transfers, forged signatures, all in my mother's handwriting. "We've been building this case for 6 months, Detective Chen continued, "but what we really need is cooperation from people close to her, people who might have noticed something unusual, people like you." The way she said it made my throat close up. "What do you mean?" She leaned forward slightly. "Elena, we know you visited your mother's office multiple times over the past few years. We have sign-in logs. We know you had access to her computer. We also know that several large transfers happened shortly after your visits." My heart started pounding. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Not accusing," she said carefully. "But we need to understand what you knew and when you knew it, because if you had knowledge of these crimes and didn't report them, that creates a very complicated situation for you." The room felt like it was closing in. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading for 3 years. Either I told the truth and destroyed what was left of my relationship with my mother, or I lied and potentially destroyed my own life. "I need to think," I whispered. "Think fast," Detective Chen replied, "because right now your mother is in the next room telling us that you helped her do this." Everything stopped, the air, my breath, time itself. "What?" "She's claiming you were involved, that you helped set up the accounts, that you advised her on how to cover her tracks. She says you're the one who came up with the phantom vendor scheme because of your design work and understanding of digital systems." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My own mother was trying to drag me down with her. After everything, after I'd kept her secret, after I'd spent 3 years sick with guilt and fear, she was throwing me under the bus to save herself. "That's a lie," I said, my voice shaking with rage now instead of fear. "I found out 3 years ago by accident, and she begged me to stay quiet. She promised she would pay it all back. She swore she was fixing it." Detective Chen's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. "Interest. Can you prove that?" My mind raced. "I have text messages, voicemails. She was constantly updating me, telling me how much she'd paid back, asking me to trust her just a little longer." "We'll need to see all of that," the detective said. "And Elena, you need to decide right now whose side you're on, because if you try to protect her after she's already betrayed you, you're going to go down with her. Is that really what you want?" I thought about every Sunday dinner where my mom smiled at me across the table while hiding hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen money. I thought about the nights I couldn't sleep, terrified that someone would find out I knew. I thought about how she'd manipulated my love for her, my loyalty, turning it into a weapon that kept me silent and complicit. And then I thought about her in that other room, calmly telling the police that I was the mastermind. "No," I said quietly, "I'll tell you everything." The next 4 hours felt like being turned inside out. I showed them every text message, every voicemail, every email where my mother had updated me on her progress in fixing her crimes. Messages where she thanked me for understanding, where she called me her rock, where she promised that our secret would stay between us. Detective Chen's expression grew darker as she read through them. "Elena, these messages, they show clear knowledge of ongoing crimes. Why didn't you report this when you first found out?" "Because she's my mother," I said, and I hated how weak my voice sounded. Because she cried and told me she'd made a mistake, that she was fixing it. Because I was terrified of destroying her life. I thought if I just gave her time, she'd make it right. "But she didn't make it right," the detective said. "She made it worse. The theft continued, even increased in the last year." That hit me like ice water. "What?" She turned her laptop toward me, showing a spreadsheet of transactions. "See these dates? These are all within the last 12 months. The amounts got bigger, more frequent. Whatever your mother told you about paying it back, she was lying. She was stealing more than ever." I stared at the numbers, feeling something crack inside my chest. All those Sunday dinners where she'd looked me in the eye and told me she was almost done fixing everything. All those reassuring texts about making progress. Every single word had been a lie. "There's something else you should know," Detective Chen said quietly. "The foundation she stole from, Riverside Community, they fund medical treatments for low-income families, children's cancer care, emergency surgeries people can't afford. Your mother didn't steal from some faceless corporation. She stole from sick kids." The room tilted. I barely made it to the trash can before I threw up. When I finally stopped shaking, Detective Chen handed me a bottle of water. "I know this is hard, but I need you to understand something. Your mother is going to prison, that's not a question anymore. The only question is whether you're going to prison with her." "But I didn't take any money," I protested weakly. "I didn't help her steal anything." "No, but you had knowledge of a crime and failed to report it. That's called misprision of felony. It's a federal offense. You could face up to 3 years. 3 years in prison for being too loyal, too loving, too stupid to turn in my own mother." "However," the detective continued, "if you cooperate fully, if you testify about what you knew and when, if you help us understand how she operated, the prosecutor might be willing to work with you. Maybe probation instead of prison time. Maybe even immunity if your cooperation is valuable enough." I looked at her through tears. "You want me to testify against my mother?" "I want you to tell the truth," she said. "Your mother already chose to betray you. All you're doing is refusing to go down with her. Have you ever been forced to choose between saving yourself and destroying the person who gave you life? When that person has already chosen to sacrifice you, does loyalty even matter anymore? Or is there a point where self-preservation stops being selfishness and starts being survival?" I left the police station 4 hours later with my phone full of evidence now copied by the authorities, and a court date scheduled for the following week. My mother was still in custody, denied bail because she was considered a flight risk. I hadn't seen her. I couldn't bear to. When I got home, my apartment felt different. Smaller, like the walls were pressing in. I sat on my couch in the dark, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. My mother had tried to frame me. The woman who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who used to read me bedtime stories and braid my hair, had looked police officers in the eye and told them I was a criminal. My phone buzzed, a text from my aunt, my mother's sister. "What did you do? How could you turn on your own mother? She's in jail because of you." So it was already starting. The family guilt campaign. The accusations that I was the bad daughter, the traitor, the one who destroyed everything. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I'd been protecting a criminal for 3 years, that my reward for loyalty was being set up as the fall guy. Another text came through, this one from my cousin. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Farmy. Lie doesn't abandon family." Then another from my uncle. "Your mother gave you everything and this is how you repay her." I turned my phone off and threw it across the room. The next few days passed in a blur of lawyers, more police interviews and media attention. Someone leaked the story to the local news and suddenly, local woman embezzles from Children's Cancer Fund, was plastered across every screen. My mother's photo was everywhere, and because we had the same last name and looked similar, people started recognizing me in public. At the grocery store, a woman I'd never met stopped me in the cereal aisle. "You're Patricia Torr's daughter, aren't you? How does it feel knowing your mother stole from dying children?" I abandoned my cart and left. At a coffee shop, the barista recognized my name on the mobile order. She didn't say anything, but I saw the look, the judgment, the disgust. I never went back. My own landlord called to check in, but what she really wanted was to make sure I wasn't involved in the crimes. "You understand, I have to protect the building's reputation," she said apologetically. Translation: I was one wrong move from an eviction notice. The isolation was suffocating. My family had turned against me. The public saw me as either a co-conspirator or the daughter of a monster. My friends didn't know what to say, so most of them said nothing at all. Radio silence was easier than awkward conversations about prison and betrayal. The only person who showed up was Marcus, my ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago. We'd broken up because I'd been so stressed and secretive about my mother's situation that I'd pushed him away. He texted me out of nowhere. "Saw the news. I understand now why you were so weird back then. You okay?" I wasn't okay, but his text made me cry in a way that felt almost like relief. Someone understood, someone didn't hate me. We met for coffee at a quiet place across town where nobody knew me. He looked the same, warm brown eyes, careful smile, the kind of person who actually listened when you talked. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," I said immediately. "When we were together, I was drowning in this secret and I couldn't tell anyone and it destroyed us." "I'm not here for an apology," Marcus said gently. "I'm here because you're going through hell and you shouldn't have to do it alone." I broke down completely. Right there in the coffee shop, I told him everything. How I'd found out how my mother had manipulated me, how I'd spent 3 years sick with guilt and fear, how she tried to frame me, how my family had turned against me, how I felt like I was being punished for both staying silent and for finally telling the truth. Marcus listened to all of it, and when I finished, he didn't judge. He just said, "None of this is your fault. You were put in an impossible situation by someone who should have protected you instead of using you." "But I should have reported it immediately," I said. "I should have been stronger." "You were scared, you loved your mother. Those are human reactions, not crimes." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What she did to you is worse than the embezzlement. She weaponized your love. She made you an accomplice through emotional manipulation. That's abuse, Elena." I'd never thought of it that way. Abuse. But he was right. My mother had abused my trust, my loyalty, my love. She'd used me as her safety net and then cut the rope. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "Testify," I said. "The prosecutor offered me immunity in exchange for full cooperation. I tell them everything I know, I help them build their case, and I walk away without charges." "Good," he said firmly. "You deserve to walk away from this. My family thinks I'm a traitor. Your family is protecting a criminal at your expense. That says everything about them and nothing about you." The trial began 3 weeks later. The courthouse was a massive grey building that felt designed to make you feel small and guilty, even if you'd done nothing wrong. I wore a simple navy dress, pulled my hair back, tried to look like someone telling the truth instead of someone caught in a nightmare. My mother's lawyer was a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit who looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. During the pretrial meetings, he'd tried everything to discredit me. "Isn't it true you were struggling financially 3 years ago? Didn't you have access to your mother's computer? Can you prove you didn't benefit from any of these stolen funds?" But my lawyer, a woman named Rebecca Chen, no relation to the detective, was better. She had the text messages, the voicemails, the timeline of my mother's lies. She had proof that I'd never received a single dollar of stolen money, that I'd been manipulated and threatened into silence. The courtroom was packed. News cameras weren't allowed inside, but journalists filled the gallery, notebooks ready. I saw my aunt and uncle sitting behind my mother's table, glaring at me with pure hatred. I saw representatives from Riverside Community Foundation, the organization my mother had stolen from. I saw parents whose children had been denied medical treatment because the funds weren't available, because my mother had taken them. When I was called to the stand, my legs barely carried me. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down facing a room full of people who either wanted to destroy me or wanted justice from me. The prosecutor, a calm older woman named Janet Rodriguez, started gently. Ms. Torres, can you tell us about your relationship with your mother? I took a breath. We were close, or I thought we were. I visited her every Sunday. We talked almost daily. She was my best friend. When did you first learn about her theft from Riverside Community Foundation? 3 years ago, June 15th. I'd gone to her office to bring her lunch. She was in a meeting, so I waited at her desk. Her computer was open to a banking site, and I saw transfer records that didn't make sense, amounts going to accounts I didn't recognize. What did you do? I confronted her that evening. She broke down crying. She told me she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd taken some money during a financial emergency and then couldn't figure out how to put it back without getting caught. She said she'd been trying to pay it back in small amounts so nobody would notice. Did you believe her? I looked directly at my mother for the first time. She sat perfectly still, her face unreadable. Yes, she's my mother. She was sobbing, telling me she was ashamed, that she'd fix everything if I just gave her time. What was I supposed to do? You could have reported it to the authorities, the prosecutor said, not unkindly. I know that now, but at the time, all I could think was that reporting her would destroy her life. She'd lose her job, face criminal charges, maybe go to prison. I thought if she was really paying it back, maybe it could be fixed quietly. Did she continue updating you about this situation? Constantly, text messages, calls, voicemails, always telling me she was making progress, that she'd paid back more, that she just needed a little more time. The prosecutor displayed the messages on a screen for the jury, dozens of them, almost done, making good progress. Thank you for believing in me, just a few more months. Ms. Torres, did your mother ever actually pay back the money she stole? No, she kept stealing more. I didn't know that until Detective Chen showed me the records. My mother lied to me for 3 years while continuing to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars. How did that make you feel? Betrayed, stupid, used, guilty. I'd spent 3 years carrying this crushing secret, terrified every day that someone would find out, hating myself for not reporting it. And the whole time she was making it worse, stealing from sick children while telling me she was fixing everything. My mother's lawyer objected to emotional manipulation of the jury, but the judge let me continue. The prosecutor then asked the question I'd been dreading. When you were arrested and questioned, what did your mother tell the police about you? I swallowed hard. She told them I was involved, that I'd helped her set up the scheme, that I'd advised her on covering her tracks. She tried to make me a co-defendant. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Even some of the jury members looked shocked. Your own mother tried to frame you? Yes. Why do you think she did that? Because she thought I'd stay silent. She'd conditioned me to protect her, to keep her secrets, to prioritize her safety over everything else. When that didn't work anymore, she tried to take me down with her. The prosecutor let that sit for a moment. Ms. Torres, are you testifying today because you want to hurt your mother? No, I said, and my voice cracked. I'm testifying because she stole from children with cancer, because she lied to me for 3 years, because she tried to send me to prison to save herself. I'm testifying because it's the right thing to do, even though it's destroying what's left of my family. When my mother's lawyer cross-examined me, he was brutal. He suggested I was lying to avoid my own charges. He implied I'd taken money and was now blaming everything on my mother. He questioned why I'd waited 3 years to come forward if I was so morally upright. Isn't it convenient, he said with a sneer, that you only decided to tell the truth once you were caught? I wasn't caught doing anything, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I came forward because my mother tried to frame me. She forced my hand. Or maybe you're just a daughter bitter about being exposed, trying to save herself by destroying her mother. If I wanted to save myself, I would have reported this 3 years ago when I first found out. I stayed silent because I loved her, I believed her. That was my mistake, and I'll have to live with it for the rest of my life. So you admit you made a mistake. You admit you were complicit. I admit I was manipulated. There's a difference. He pressed harder, trying to rattle me, but I'd been through too much to break now. Every question he asked I answered honestly. Yes, I'd kept the secret. Yes, I'd failed to report a crime. Yes, I felt guilty about that. But no, I didn't steal anything. No, I didn't help plan anything. And no, I wasn't going to lie to protect someone who'd already sacrificed me. When I finally stepped down from the stand, my hands were shaking and my throat was raw. But I'd done it. I'd told the truth. The trial continued for another week. Financial experts testified about the scope of the theft. Representatives from Riverside Community Foundation testified about families who'd been denied help because the money was gone. One mother broke down describing how she'd been told there were no funds available for her daughter's chemotherapy, only to later learn that money had been there but stolen. My mother never took the stand. Her lawyer advised against it, probably because cross-examination would have destroyed her. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was swift and unanimous: guilty on all counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, falsifying records. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. In that time, my mother finally reached out to me, not to apologize, not to explain, to ask me to write a letter to the judge requesting leniency. I stared at her email for a long time. Even now, even after everything, she thought she could use me. I didn't write the letter. At sentencing, the judge was clear and cold. Ms. Torres, you didn't just steal money. You stole hope from families in crisis. You betrayed a community that trusted you. You showed no remorse, and worse, you attempted to blame your own daughter for your crimes. That level of moral bankruptcy warrants the maximum sentence. 15 years in federal prison, asset forfeiture, full restitution, though the prosecutor admitted it was unlikely my mother could ever pay back $300,000. My mother's face crumpled. My aunt screamed that the system was corrupt. My uncle shouted at me across the courtroom, calling me a traitor, and worse, security had to escort them out. I sat there in silence, watching my mother be led away in handcuffs. Part of me felt relief. Part of me felt grief so heavy I could barely breathe. This was my mother, the woman who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up with me when I had nightmares, who'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. But she was also the woman who'd stolen from dying children, who'd lied to my face for 3 years, who'd tried to send me to prison to save herself. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. "Elena, how do you feel about your mother's sentence? Do you regret testifying? Will you ever forgive her?" Marcus was there, pushing through the crowd to reach me. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and guided me to his car without saying a word. He just drove, and I just sat there, numb and exhausted. "Where do you want to go?" he finally asked. "I don't know, not home, not yet." He took me to a park by the river, a place we used to go when we were dating. We sat on a bench watching the water, and slowly the numbness started to crack. "I did the right thing," I said, but it sounded like a question. "You did," Marcus confirmed. "Then why does it feel like I just destroyed my entire life?" "Because doing the right thing isn't always clean. Sometimes it's messy and painful and it costs you everything, but that doesn't make it wrong." I started crying then, really crying, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and desperate. Marcus held me while I fell apart, and when I finally stopped, he said something I needed to hear. "Your mother made her choices, you made yours. You chose truth over loyalty, justice over family. That takes more courage than most people will ever have to show." The weeks after sentencing were strange. The media attention faded. My family stopped contacting me, which hurt less than I expected. I started therapy to process the trauma and manipulation I'd endured. I changed my phone number, my email, even considered changing my last name. But I also started rebuilding. I reached out to old friends I'd pushed away. I went on dates with Marcus again, slowly, carefully, learning to trust that not everyone would weaponize my love. I threw myself into my design work, finding freelance clients who didn't care about my last name or my mother's crimes. 3 months after the sentencing, I received a letter. Prison mail, my mother's handwriting. My hands shook as I held it. Part of me wanted to burn it without reading, but another part needed to know what she'd say now that the trial was over, the cameras were gone, and it was just us again. I opened it. The letter was short, no apology for what she'd done, no acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. Instead, it was full of self-pity and blame. She wrote about how hard prison was, how unfair the sentence was, how I'd destroyed the family by testifying. She ended with, "I hope you can live with what you've done to me. I hope the guilt doesn't eat you alive like it should." I read it twice, feeling anger build with each word. Then I did something I should have done 3 years ago. I wrote back. "Mom, I can live with what I did because I told the truth. The question is whether you can live with what you did. You stole from children with cancer. You lied to me for 3 years. You tried to send me to prison. Those are your choices, not mine. I loved you enough to carry your secret until it nearly destroyed me. You loved yourself enough to sacrifice me without hesitation. I hope someday you understand the difference. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I won't be writing again. Goodbye, Mom. I sent the letter and felt something shift inside me. Not closure exactly, but the beginning of it. The start of accepting that some relationships can't be saved, and some kinds of love are poisonous even when they're real. 6 months later, I was in a better place. Marcus and I had moved in together. My design business was thriving. I'd even started volunteering at Riverside Community Foundation, helping them redesign their website and donation systems. It felt right, helping rebuild what my mother had tried to destroy. One afternoon, I got a call from Rebecca Chen, my lawyer. "Elena, I wanted you to hear this from me. Your mother filed an appeal. It was denied. The sentence stands." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "There's something else. The foundation wants to thank you publicly. They're planning an event honoring people who helped expose the fraud and protect future donors. They want to include you." My first instinct was to say no. I didn't want attention. I didn't want to be a hero. I'd just been trying to survive. But then I thought about all those families who'd been denied help because my mother stole their funds. I thought about the children who deserved better. And I thought about the 3 years I'd spent hiding the truth, how that silence had eaten away at me from the inside. "Okay," I told Rebecca, "I'll do it." The event was small but meaningful. Representatives from families who'd been helped after the stolen funds were recovered shared their stories. A little girl who'd received her cancer treatment stood on stage with her mother, healthy and smiling. The foundation director talked about implementing new oversight systems to prevent future fraud. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I'm not here because I'm brave. I'm here because I finally chose truth over fear. I spent 3 years protecting someone who didn't deserve protection, and in doing so, I failed people who desperately needed that money. I can't undo that, but I can make sure it never happens again, and I can encourage anyone else carrying a secret like I was to speak up before it's too late. The truth will hurt. But silence hurts more, and it hurts people who don't deserve it. After the event, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course." "My dad works in finance," she said quietly. "I think he's doing something illegal. I've seen things that don't make sense, but he's my dad and I don't know what to do. Everyone says family is everything, that you don't betray family, but watching your story I keep thinking, what if staying quiet makes me part of it?" I looked at this young woman, seeing myself 3 years ago, standing at the same impossible crossroads. "Family is important," I told her, "but so is doing the right thing, and sometimes those two things can't coexist. Only you can decide what you can live with. But I'll tell you this, I spent 3 years protecting my mother, and my reward was being framed as a criminal. The people who demand your silence are rarely the people who deserve your loyalty." She nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, that helps." I gave her my number. "If you need someone to talk to, someone who understands, call me. You don't have to do this alone." She hugged me tightly, and I realized this was why I'd agreed to speak, not for recognition, but because my story might save someone else from the same nightmare. That night, lying in bed next to Marcus, I thought about everything that had happened. The discovery, the lies, the betrayal, the trial, the aftermath. I thought about my mother sitting in prison, probably still believing she was the victim. I thought about my family who'd chosen her side without ever asking for mine. And I thought about the version of myself who'd kept that secret for 3 years, terrified and guilty, and slowly disappearing under the weight of someone else's crimes. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked quietly in the darkness, testifying. "No," I said, and I meant it. "I regret not doing it sooner. I regret the 3 years I wasted protecting someone who was willing to destroy me, but telling the truth, that's the only thing I don't regret." He pulled me closer. "I'm proud of you. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know." "It helps," I whispered, "more than you know." The last thing I did before falling asleep was delete my mother's contact from my phone, not out of anger anymore, just out of acceptance. That chapter of my life was over. She'd made her choices and I'd made mine. Now I had to live with mine, and surprisingly I could. Because here's what I learned. Loyalty to people who betray you isn't love, it's self-destruction. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is save yourself, even if it means walking away from the people who gave you life. My mother taught me many things: how to be kind, how to work hard, how to care for others. But the most important lesson she taught me, though she never intended to, was this: your love for someone doesn't obligate you to be their accomplice. And protecting yourself from people who would sacrifice you isn't betrayal, it's survival. If someone you loved committed a terrible crime and begged you to stay silent, would you protect them or protect the truth? And if they tried to destroy you to save themselves, would you have the strength to let them face the consequences alone? These are questions I hope you never have to answer. But if you do, I hope you choose yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're the only person guaranteed to be there when everyone else walks away.